So, my name is Zachary Gage. I am the owner of Promoted Resume, where we do help people get jobs and elevate their career in all levels of professionalism. So, early career, fresh graduates, all the way to senior executive, C-level, people and everywhere in between. And whether it's changing careers, moving up the ladder, um, relocating, salary negotiation, leadership training, or just simply finding a new role, what you're already doing, that's our bread and butter of what we do.
Nice. So, say if you're fresh out of high school and you've been disillusioned by the whole college scam, uh, how would you help that person?
Yeah, I mean, I myself am not a college graduate. I attended a semester and a half of community college. My second semester of community college, I was arrested. And so then I dropped out and have had my life and career ever since. So, um, I am someone who could definitely speak to, not going the college education route. My entire family's not college educated as well. My brother was the first one to ever get a degree, and it was an associate's degree. And really, the key thing that we all have in common is either going into a trade or identifying something where you can get your foot in the door with a certification, or possibly just no education at all. You look at something like, sales, for instance. Sales is a limitless career with incredibly high pay that you don't need any actual education for. My background is in IT, information technology, worked my way up through that ladder. I got one baseline certification that would take any high school graduate maybe 90 days and $100 to get done. And then I've worked my way up from there very quickly, was making six figures in 4 years. Um, my mom was a piggyback entrepreneur. My grandfather started a family business. My mom helped run that. And then when that business closed, she transitioned to the private sector super easily with her 30 years of finance and HR. My dad went from construction over to IT as well, doing the same route that I did. He figured out the certifications needed, took a couple months, nailed out a couple certifications, and moved over. So college is definitely not a requirement. It's simply identifying what is possible in terms of what you want to do, looking at what the prerequisites are, whether it's certifications, just diving right in, networking with the right people, whatever it might be, and hitting the ground running. And I think that in the long run, if you can sustain the continuous improvement, you'll outpace, college graduates because you have a 4 year head start, 4 to 5 year head start. The average bachelor's graduate takes 5 years. So if you have 5 years of work experience, 5 years of salary negotiation, 5 years of potential leadership, etc. Again, I was making six figures by the time my friends were graduating college. You don't make
And
six figures coming right out of college.
and no debt. So that's like
Yeah,
double good. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
you're not paying off anything. It's pure profit. For I shouldn't say that initial investment $100, like you said, for the certification. So I mean, and two months of study. So I don't know. That just feeds into the whole like college being a bad idea thing. But I appreciate your verbosity on all of this. Was so I've known in case you don't know, I've known Zach for a while. We've worked together for a while, and he's always been he's an analytical guy, but at the same time, like yeah, prudent, and he thinks about the he has a dedication to success in general, despite the subject or the goal or anything. So I appreciate the verbosity, and you have a good way of speaking about things, and that's why I wanted you here today, uh, especially in your line of work where you're helping people get jobs and uh, upgrade their success a bit. So,
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate the compliment.
yeah. So today you brought some tips and tricks, like four or five things to get people either like land themselves in a better situation than if they didn't have this information, right? Or like if they're in a job and they want to get to the next level. I mean, there's got to be some general rules because this is like what you do. This is your bread and butter. So trying to condense everything that you would need into a few tips is hard, but there's got to be some sort of like fundamental layer or things that you could do in order to increase your chances of success.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the thing is it's funny. I ran through multiple different ways to kind of try to condense this and make it pretty absorbable. And started out as I think I'm going to have two separate lists. One for kind of moving up in the corporate world and getting to the next level, and one for seeking a new job. And the more I thought about it, the more I actually realized it's the same thing. So I do have it condensed down to a select few rules, and kind of what those are is we'll start off with switching your mindset to risk mitigation. So most people look at whether they are job hunting or, again, looking to move up, that it's all about what can I get or what can I provide, but you have to look at the employer's perspective in either of these scenarios. So if you're looking for a new job, the average FTE salary, full-time employee, is $60,000 a year. You factor in benefits, which depending on the company and what they offer, on average is another $25,000 to $30,000. So the average full-time employee is at $90,000 cost to the business. Ask yourself, if I ask you to invest $90,000 in me today, how much scrutiny are you going to go through to mitigate the risk on your $90,000 of cash?
Right. So you have to make them feel good.
Yeah.
That
And
tip
that's
might
what the
make 'em
whole
feel good.
exactly. So that's what getting a job is all about. And my approach when it comes to resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, I kind of lump all that in as calling it pre-hire documentation. That's what it's all about. Risk mitigation is how do you minimize risk and maximize return? So it's no different than also an investor mindset. But that's the key way to look at that from a job hunt scenario. And then when you're flipping over to kind of moving up, what most people don't realize is the higher up the ladder you go, the bigger your scope of impact, right? As an individual contributor, that's exactly your scope, individual. As a manager, you now have the department. As a director, you now have potentially multiple departments or intra-department segmentation. As you go C-level, VP, etc., right? Like your scope just grows and grows and grows. And again, it's all about risk mitigation. How do you minimize the downside risk for the business as a whole? So the bottom line, the revenue, your vendors, your relationships, etc. So risk mitigation is actually, I think, a key portion in here. Now you take that to its extreme, you're too conservative, never get anything done. You take it to the other extreme, you just fail constantly because you're costing both yourself and an organization too much. So it is finding that healthy balance, but most people look at the positive return or what they're going to get or those sorts of things. But if you can just simply minimize downside, that's huge. I mean, why is it that most operators, director of operations, chief operating officers, etc., one of their key highlights is how much money can you save me? How well can we run in a down economy? Right? It's minimizing downside.
Easy.
So
And is that like pretty universal?
yeah,
Or is there any variation between like industry or anything? It's universal?
yeah. I mean, I've found it to be universal, and I've both myself worked in a variety of industries. So I mean, my background is in no particular industry. I've worked in retail, I've worked in marketing, printing, manufacturing, oil and gas. I'm now in the tech space for the third time. Healthcare is also one I've done. I started out at IBM. So yeah, I've worked in a myriad of industries and
And
clients.
running your own business, entrepreneurship.
Yep, so I have that as well. And when it comes to the clients I serve, I've expanded into industries I never thought I would. But still one of my favorites to this day is helping a wildland firefighter, reach the next level and get a new job. And that was somebody I never expected to help when it came to resume writing, salary negotiation, and that sort of component. So I mean, it goes all the way from the blue collar of blue collar. At the same time, I've helped multiple C levels, like COOs and CTOs and CIOs. So yeah, industry has been agnostic, and the key thing is the risk mitigation is kind of a foundation of every aspect, from job hunt through job execution.
So is that something you discovered when you started your own career business, like this resume business?
I think it's universality is what I discovered, because I've always helped people write resumes. Even from the time I graduated high school, so I had a leg up. Again, I'd mentioned My mom's background was HR and finance. And at the same time, my brother he's 6 years older than me, and he got really in with the HR department at the first organization he worked for. And so I kind of had a big leg up on resume writing and getting a new role. I've never been unemployed for longer than 30 days unless it was intentional. I have a 90+% offer rate on interviews that I personally have done, things like that. And so I've always felt that resumes in general are a risk mitigation document. Same thing with cover letters. LinkedIn is a little bit more of a different beast, but more or less it's 90% in lockstep with your resume. So it kind of follows the same philosophy. But expanding into industries that I don't have direct exposure to through the business are definitely what solidified its universal principles,
Yeah.
I think, of the risk portion.
So I'm gonna just take some notes so we can loop back because I want you to get through your list here.
Okay.
Um, what's the so that was two, right?
That was one.
That was one.
Risk mitigation. Yeah.
Oh, that's all risk mitigation. Okay, and then
Yep.
I started going off on tangents. That's what happened. So yeah, let's move on to the second point. So risk mitigation.
Yep. And this one is going to be a little bit cliche, I'll be honest, but go the extra mile. So if you're looking at the job hunt scenario, personalized to every application. Um, it can be what people have to realize is their scope of competition. Back in the day, you were competing against your town. Unless you're purely on site and companies and people aren't willing to relocate there, like your competition is now expanded because you have relocation competition. If it's a remote position, now you're against the country. You could possibly be against the globe if they're open to international. So taking the time to
Corporations.
actually, yeah. So taking the time to actually analyze the job description, use the company's keywords in your pre-hire documentation. Do a gap analysis of what am I representing on my resume and cover letter? What are they asking for? And maybe there's a real estate issue, but you also realize there's things that don't apply necessarily to this particular posting. So subtract those and fill in the gaps. Like take the time to personalize to every application. It goes a long way because not only is your scope of competition increased, but the market right now is brutal. I mean, the amount of applicants out there, it is definitely employer favored in that regard. So your competition is just
Yeah,
higher.
sounds
So
like it.
exactly. And then on the moving up and kind of career progression side, I feel like it's relatively self-explanatory. But the one thing I've told every person that has ever worked for me, with me, or that I've helped is do the job before you get it. Figure out how again, it kind of ties back into risk mitigation on this one. But the biggest thing a company doesn't want to do is promote you, move you laterally, whatever it might be, and then realize it was a mistake. So figure out how to do it now. Do it before they even entertain the idea. And then when you do go to do your proposal or apply for the job, you already have a track record. The question is already answered. So,
Puts a question in my head.
yeah,
So when you're moving from one job to another, you are trying to look for a better job than what you're leaving, right? So, um, is that sort of like a rule, or is it just like a bonus on top? Because this relates
finding something
to
better.
doing, yeah. If you're moving jobs and you're trying to find, is it like should I be looking for something better or just the same, like lateral move, just in a different company? Like, what's the strat?
Yeah, to me, I would say 9 times out of 10, you should always be looking for improvement in some regard, whether that is moving up the ladder, whether it's compensation, whether it's opportunity. There should be some tangible benefit relatively immediately in any sort of job move. Um, why I say 9 times out of 10 is the 1 out of 10 is do not understate the impact of just being in a terrible place. If you are in a toxic place that's hurting your mental health, that's bleeding into other areas of your life, you're not able to be the person you want to be on a day-to-day basis, then just get out. Then at that point, making more of a one-to-one change. But even then, you still have the tangible benefit of the culture and the mental health. But you're not necessarily looking to move up or make more money or those sorts of
Yeah.
things. So,
I would say it's a
uh,
psychological move up, so yeah, that's
yes,
fine. But
So that's the thing. You
so
should
that's
always
a
be
little
looking
different.
for.
I was just going to say
Okay.
that's a little different moving from one job to another. The sort of like aspiring for like moving up is
Hmm.
a little different than if you're just getting into a market
Yeah,
because like you're just trying to take anything, but the piece of advice is like already be in that role, like already act like you're in that role type of thing.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. And it goes the same way if you are looking at a particular company or a particular job, start filling the gaps immediately, right? Because then the other thing is that when you do apply, whether it's in your cover letter or resume, you could show what you've done over the last 6 months or a year that's specific to them.
Right, dude, that's a power move right there.
Yeah.
So, because like nobody's, I don't imagine a lot of people are doing that. Like going to a company and see like even like doing their sort of like reconnaissance, seeing exactly what they need and then tailoring their experience to that. Like why wouldn't they hire you at that point?
Yeah. No, and it's funny, that actually leads into my third one that I'm going to say here because the best way you can gather that information is networking. Um, so you can definitely look at the job descriptions, look at their company website, look at their LinkedIn page and gather a decent amount of intel there. But if you really want the inside track, connect with people at the organization on things like LinkedIn or other social media platforms. Um, and do this strategically. So target people that are in the same position as what you're going for. Target maybe the hiring manager or the person above you. If you're already in sort of a team lead manager or like some form of leadership role, target the people that would report to you because each one of them will give you a different perspective of the inside track on the business. And you want to figure out what technologies they're using. What are they struggling to find within candidates? What are their values, these sorts of things. And boom, not only now do you know how to advertise yourself and what to learn and maybe determine what your upcoming growth track record is, but this also gives you the ability to where if you fail the interview, it's 100% your fault. Because to me, an interview, this is where I'm going to slightly flip on the risk mitigation concept is the interview is less about risk mitigation because you've already mitigated enough risk to get your foot in the door. The interview is about driving value. Make them money before they even spend money on you because an interview is free. So if you do your reconnaissance and you know the problems that they're having, you know what they're struggling to find, that's what you're saying in the interview. Here's the problems I'm going to solve for you, how I'm going to solve it. Here's my 30, 60, 90-day plan. Here's the pain points I know you're having and what I'm going to do. And you're literally making them money before they pay you money. And at that point, your interview is golden. It's done.
Yeah. So speaking of interviews, a lot of people get nervous about, you know, we'll say being questioned by a board, uh, because you never know what they're going to ask, right? Now there are some like tropes that you usually hear in the interview, but let's say you're brand new to an industry and it's your first real like job interview and you really want this job. Uh, you've done your reconnaissance. Do you is the mindset going in? I'm ready. I'm prepared to answer their questions, or is there another mindset that's preferable? Like, like I have my answers. I'm gonna take over this interview. Right.
Yes, I think it's the latter. And the question is how to get there, right? Like that is obviously the mindset. You need a mindset of confidence, but the question is how to get there, especially if you've never done real interviews. And to me, I find that there's two things that people why they are not confident in an interview scenario. The first one is simply lack of practice. And how I tell people to solve this is two ways. One is leverage the resources you can practice with around you. So if you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, spouse, etc., use them as someone to mock interview with. Have them ask you questions, have it be a conversational thing, because that's the other component is an interview should be conversational and bi-directional. It's not just ask question, answer.
Yeah.
Right? You should also be asking questions and probing them and trying to tailor a response from them as well to make it a back and forth. And if you can't do that with your girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, spouse, best friend, whatever, then you have some work to improve there,
No.
right? Because you know that person.
Guaranteed, you're like at home, you're manipulating your significant other all the time. So that's wrong. But the one opportunity you have to where it's a good thing is in an interview with a company. Like
Yeah,
manipulate them, you know?
a little bit, yeah. And another hidden gem for this, actually, I tell people is if you have kids, leverage your kids for an interview. Because if you can keep a child entertained talking about your career, you have good stories. Because stories are how you nail an interview. So if they're wowed by what you're saying, you've nailed it. The other trick is let's say you have nobody. Let's say, you're a complete, isolationist and you have nobody in your practice in the mirror and be honest with yourself. Do you like your facial expression? Do you like your body language? Because if you don't like it, why do you expect somebody else to?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the easiest and most free hack. Even before maybe you're still embarrassed or hesitant to go to someone else in your circle, start with yourself in the mirror.
Yeah. John Taylor Gatto actually talks about that a little bit, where he says in order to be a complete human being, you have to know yourself, and part of that means being self-aware, and a huge part of actually gaining self-awareness is by looking at yourself in a mirror and seeing like what you look like in different situations, like different scenarios, how you talk, how you present yourself. So, like, that's a pro tip right there, like just a life tip in general.
Yeah, I actually could say I had this realization. It's definitely been in the last year where I was sitting there brushing my teeth, normal nightly routine. And it just popped in my head that when I look in the mirror, I look at myself, not in myself. And
And that,
so I generally will look at the person in the mirror, but I don't stare myself in the eyes. Like I don't look into my own soul, right? I actually don't look into myself. And when I made that change, you're a lot of people say, like gratitude practice, reflect on your day and blah, 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 blah. But to me, that is what actually staring yourself in the mirror looks like is can you look yourself in the eyes? Not can you look at yourself, but can you look in yourself in the mirror? And when you do that, you will immediately absolve any BS or filtering that you are doing to lie to yourself or obscure
mm,
things to yourself. And because you know the truth, right? I'll give Alex Hormozy quote here, or credit here. One of the things that he says is like, "But I will know." Right? If he didn't give 110%, if he didn't do everything he could, and if he can look back and go, "Ah, I should have done this," only you will know that. Right? Other people might think you're doing awesome. And so when you begin to look at yourself in the eyes, that is the only mode that you can operate in is I know.
yeah, there's only one place to hide in that scenario, and that's denial.
Yeah,
Denial is your only, uh, way to get away from yourself in that situation. Nice. Well,
exactly. And hold on, we didn't touch the second thing for interview confidence, which is a really quick one.
oh yeah,
Um, which is most people don't take control of the interview. And this is done very easily. First tip, I'm going to segment this into two very quick tips. The first one, get there 15 minutes early. That way, A, you look good. But really, the reason is selfish. While you're sitting in the lobby, you're waiting for the interview to start, whatever, do some breath work. Just breathe, relax. Know that you're there early, you're kosher, you already checked the box and beat your competition in one regard because you're there early. Take that second and resolve yourself in it. The second is almost every interview will start with the same question, which is also the question everybody hates the most, which is tell me about yourself.
yeah,
And the most simple hack is this is where you take control of the interview. You actually don't answer the question immediately. You respond with another question. Do you want to know about me personally or professionally? And this does so many things for you. One, it gives you time to realize I'm in the interview, I'm in the game. I'm now on my 100-meter sprint. I'm now doing what Usain Bolt does, right? I'm not at the lineup anymore. It's already started. So you can settle your nerves.
and they're gonna
Two,
say, why not bolt?
well, and so that's actually what you're looking for, right? Is if they don't want to know about you personally, do you really want to work for that person, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a
Now
good
the
point.
now the interview just becomes practice for you. That's all it is. Because if they don't care about who you are as a human being, okay, I'm out. So the answer should be both. So now you're putting them on the spot as well. But they'll also kind of tell you the scope. And you've already made it interactive. You already asserted yourself as, hey, this is going to be bi-directional. There's going to be some questions coming from me, and it's from the beginning. You're not waiting until the end of the last 10 minutes where they go, what
Conversation now.
questions do you have for me? Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that
From the
also
very
ties in with
outset.
rule one. That ties in with rule one that like you have to also remember that they're like look at it from the company standpoint, right?
Yep.
So I mean it's all coming together now. The
Yeah.
uh, I think that's like the I don't know, I really like that rule because I mean immediately that is a pro tip right there. Immediately you take over the conversation and you get to know it, um everything you need to know in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the simplest thing. Um, and the last thing is, on that is 9 times out of 10, they're going to say both because every company is going to want to put their best foot forward. And the key thing there is keep it concise. Don't give them a diatribe or a novel about both your personal and
The
professional.
entire life.
Yeah. Like both of those together should be 2 minutes tops.
Yeah.
It
Relevant
shouldn't be this
information.
crazy thing. Exactly. And then at the end of that, ask about themselves, right? Like ask if it's a panel person, hey, tell me about your career here. Tell me about where you guys come from,
Mm.
whatever it is, right? Again, continue that conversation.
Okay. So that's three, right?
Yeah, that's three. And then we'll go with four here, which is the last one, is think of yourself as an investment. Um, you know, people understand generally the concept of investing in compound interest, right? If I do $50 a week by the end of the year, I'll have $2,500 a year. Or, if I have 4% interest, I have interest stacking on interest, etc. But what you have to understand about yourself is skills stack on skills, right? And it's the one thing that can't be taken away. You can lose your job. You can lose your wife. You can lose your house. You could lose your kids. You could lose your dog. You could lose everything. You can't lose what you've learned. I mean, at that point, if you do, you have brain damage and you have bigger problems than worrying about where your next job is. So that's the one thing that can't be taken away from you. And so think of yourself as an investment, right? And think about it over the long haul. And again, you don't become the end game result overnight. And so I know it's a big cliche of like, oh, continuous improvement and buzzword this and buzzword that, but the mindset shift is not just, oh, I have to learn this or oh, I need to get better, but it's genuinely, oh, this is my 3% interest now. And if I continue to stack, the interesting thing about skill stacking is I would make the argument your interest rate is changing over time, or your dividend interest is changing as you increase more. But even if it wasn't, it's funny, you and I were having this conversation in a very different regard yesterday. It's the nature of percentages. Let's say you have a 5% increase of return every year. Well, okay, let's say over the next 5 years, you go from $50,000 a year to 125. 5% on 125 is still a lot greater than 5% on 50. So even if you maintained a flatline improvement, because it's a percentage increase, you're still going to get better. And so it's shifting to simply thinking of yourself as you are the investment. And by learning skills, improving yourself, those are just stacking on top of each other for value add of value add of value add of value add. And it never stops.
Right. And that sounds like you're talking a lot. I mean, that's going to include a lot of, or it's going to require a lot of consistency. Because like you don't want to burn yourself out, right? Do you think you can like just charge hard, like go hard in the paint for hours and hours and hours for like say a couple of weeks? How long do you think you can keep that up for normally? While on the in contrast, you do just dedicate 2 hours a day to intense study over a long period of time. And
It, so I can't say that I'm sold out on the traditional concept of burnout. I have a very unique, maybe not even very unique, but I think I have a deviated idea of what burnout really is. I think burnout comes from the lack of excitement and the lack of actual intrigue in what you are doing, more so than the quantity of work itself. I will also tangent this and I will ask you a question. When was the last time that you were burnt out and not under rested?
I can't even remember if that's ever happened.
Okay, so there's that side of it too, is most people get burnt out because they aren't taking care of themselves or they aren't sleeping well or they aren't dieting well, they aren't exercising. It's right, like it's one of those things to where I think when you look at both of these things, burnout becomes very rare. If you are making sure that you are rested, you are taken care of, your mental and physical faculties are in a
Also
good place.
seeing interest in the thing that you're doing too.
It, exactly, and you're genuinely intrigued in what you're doing. This doesn't mean you have to be ultra passionate about it. Also, side tangent that maybe we can, if you want to get into it later, I don't think passions are found. I think they're built. So that kind of ties back into this as well. But yeah, if you lack that genuine intrigue and you're not taking care of yourself, that's where the burnout really comes from. So I actually think it really is long-term sustainable. But I think where your efforts are going to go is what changes, right? I do think life is comprised of seasons or periodizations, right? So you might have the next 6 months of where you are just education growth and skill growth. But then maybe you get to a spot in your career where you're like, okay, now I need to learn less and execute more. So maybe your learning takes the back burner, but the time that you are investing here goes into the time of execution. So I think that overall, the quote unquote overworking or time investment, energy investment, I think that's sustainable over the long term if you're doing something. The question simply becomes, what are you investing in that season of your life to have the biggest impact?
So, studying isn't fun. Is the is the trick just keeping your eye on the prize, like making sure that's at the forefront every single day of your mind?
No, I think if you, I think if you're motivated, as you know me, I hate that word. But if you are motivated by the result, that is fleeting and unreliable. What you need to figure out how to do is humans to me are motivated by dopamine, right? So we'll get into a little bit of neuroscience here. And anticipation of achievement is more fulfilling for most people than the achievement itself, right? Think about anything that you've won or you've done, even if it's not necessarily winning, but if you're like, hey, I want to run a mile, you anticipating or thinking about yourself running that mile for the first time is way more powerful than when you actually do it. Because when you do it, you might have like a few seconds of like, woo, but then you're like, all right, what's next? So if you're motivated by the result or fueled by the result, that's going to eventually be fleeting, especially if you don't know what the next result is. So to me, the actual hack is figure out how to give yourself wins along the way. So give yourself micro wins. So here's an example that's most people can understand and relate to from the fitness perspective. I forget the gentleman's name. I genuinely don't remember, but there's a famous Olympic lifting coach. I think it was for the US team. Might not have been, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but overall the philosophy will be very easily relatable. To where what he did is he had every person on the Olympic lifting team document every set, every rep, every weight of every exercise they've ever done. Okay. And what this allows them to do is every workout, they would be forced to set a new PR, a new personal record. So let's say you haven't done bicep curls in 2 years and you go back in your notebook and you're like, oh, I did 10 reps at 50 pounds. I could do 11 today. I could do 10 reps of 51 pounds, right? Like you can, like if you can always give yourself a win on the day, then that's your mini win and you're thinking about it and you're like, okay, so today when I go and do this thing, I'm going to set a new record. You get that dopamine rush, you get that anticipation, and then you do it, and then you know you have one again coming the next day. And even if it's not every day that you're doing a PR, if you can at least make it a couple times a week, right? Something at a decent frequency, that's what's going to keep you going in the long run, not necessarily keeping your eye on the prize, because the prize is irrelevant. The prize might change, especially if you have a 5-year goal. How likely is that 5-year goal to be the same, right? Especially with technology changing.
Shut in.
Exactly.
Things
So
going to change around you.
yeah, so that's the other thing, because usually as you get older and more in your life, your time horizon changes. You think less about your goal next week and you think more about the goal next year or 5 years or 10 years. So those are less likely to be static. So you need to figure out the micro wins in the immediate future.
Okay. And are there any like glaring pitfalls when you're trying to so you have your goal or whatever, but it's not even really about the goal. You know, you're just your constant improvement comes from it sounds like a system. Like it's better to have a system than a goal.
Yeah, fall in love with the process, not the result, right? I mean, so um is it Simon Sinek that defined finite and infinite games?
Yeah,
I believe it is.
yeah, he wrote a book about it. Yeah,
And
infinite game.
okay, and so that's like the key to all of this is most rewarding things in life and most of life itself is an infinite game or is comprised of infinite games within the finite game of life. Um, quick definitions of each of these finite games are ones where you know the rules, you know the competitors, and you know how to win. Infinite games, you don't know the rules, you don't know the players, and you're playing to play. So examples of each, baseball is a finite game. You know how to win. You know the rules, you know the competitors, you know the strategy, etc. Take something like marriage, or we'll stick with the fitness analogy. Either one. The goal of marriage is not to get married; it's to stay married. It's an infinite game. The goal of working out is not to get in shape; it's to stay in shape, so that you can do what you want the rest of your life. So these are infinite games, and the way you succeed at infinite games are falling in love with the process, not the result, because there is no winning, right? Like there is no winning at marriage. There is no winning in your career. There is no winning in exercise. It's
Until you
you win
die.
by continuing to do. Exactly.
And then you die.
So yeah, so system might have a negative connotation here. It might not be the perfect word because system, I think, implies constraint, or implies being in a box, and that's not entirely true because definitely the system that works for me, or the fact that I work with systems, doesn't mean that you will, as an artist or very creative person, or just a different mindset and type of thinker. So it's figuring out the process that works for
An
you.
artist. I think it'd be beneficial for an artist. And yeah, it might be restrictive or whatever, but also like I've learned that just dedicating time to a certain thing, whether it's artistic or not, uh, sort of like you put yourself say, I'm gonna write this book, right? And it's not working out. You've been trying to write it for like 2 years, and you go through bursts like, oh, I'll write like 3 chapters in one fucking day, and then forget about it for like 6 months because you're like, I don't feel like doing that today. But if you have a system of, when I wake up first thing in the morning, I'm going to sit in my chair for 3 hours. Just sit in the chair. And if I get something done, but I can't move from that chair for 3 hours, you usually end up with something in that 3 hours. And that's still a system. You just dedicate some time of focus.
Yeah. No, and that's fair. And so yeah, I guess
artistic things.
and yeah, and I think what you're touching on there is how strict the system is, right? Like, are you saying, here's what I'm doing every 5 minutes of the day, or here's my exact order of operations, right? Like
That
the
sounds like
extreme
nature.
system, right? Or kind of like what you're saying, I'm going to sit in this chair. What comes of it may come of it, right? It's still a system. You're still creating structure, but it's very loose and flexible. And usually, most people fall somewhere in that spectrum, in those extremes. Um, and even I'm continuing to adapt my systems and my amount of structure, um, as I honestly move forward in life, I guess you could say. Um, it's interesting. I used to be very free form, then I went ultra structured, and now I'm figuring out the middle ground that actually works best for me still. And I think that's another one of those infinite games, is maximizing your own efficiency, productivity, and output.
Yep.
Right? Like there is no finite box. There will always be a new technology tool, a new AI system now, right? There's always going to be a new something for you to better your own output, and you have to constantly be looking for those things.
It is it, and that was for the fourth one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any, just like, last question in regard to this type of thing? Are there any common pitfalls, things to look out for? Just like lightning round, bonus round. What is it? What is a common thing that you see in your line of work? Because you work with a lot of people who are going through job
Yeah.
transitions or promotions.
Honestly, the most common one is a level of imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome is very misunderstood. Um,
Hmm.
if you are moving up, changing careers, changing industries, you are by definition an imposter. That's okay.
Yeah, I have
So,
here in the notes from a thing that you said earlier, fake it till you make it.
yeah. And so that's the thing, right? Is embracing imposter syndrome instead of letting it cripple you is the key, is understanding I am an imposter. That's okay because I will no longer be an imposter in this thing at some point. So that's something where most common, especially career transitions, people are like, "Oh, but I've done this thing for 30 years." Like because a lot of the transitions are less on the younger side of people that I've dealt with in the last couple of years. It's been mostly, people between like 40 and 60 who have 15, 20, 30 years of experience in the line of work and they're like, "I don't know how I can make this happen." Okay, let's take the step back. What did you do at a philosophical level? What was your 50,000 foot view transferable skills? And then it helps alleviate the imposter syndrome. And then now you're down to just, okay, I may not understand the finance industry because I've been in healthcare, but job function wise, I had that nailed down. And then I just need to learn the industry. And that's very trainable and learnable. But I think embracing imposter syndrome is the biggest misconception and most common pitfall that I think people have when trying to move. And even if it's a lateral move from company to company, it's, oh, am I going to be worthy of this organization? Or, in this move, I might be getting a $10,000, $15,000 raise, just because the pay has gone up in the industry or the company pays more. Am I going to be worth that? Right? Like imposter syndrome happens everywhere and just embrace it. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great tool because like there's so many um stories about like some successful people. There are so many stories where they like pretended to know something, and like I mean, like catch me if you can. Like he's not a particularly extraordinary person. He just disregarded rules. That's the whole film. Is his like he didn't care about the rules of
Yeah.
society. That was the whole film, and he's not a particularly like excellent person. And he had patience too. So patience and a disregard for the societal structure, and I mean it took him really far, you know. And he did spend some time studying too, like he watched TV shows in order to get like
Mm-hmm.
medical terminology and everything like that, and he had a dictionary if you read his biography. But yeah, uh, it's pretty awesome, like how far that can get you. So we can wrap it up. You want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah. So promotedresume.com is the website. And we also have linkedin.com/in/Zachary-Gage will be my LinkedIn page. And while we don't have it set up today, within the coming weeks, we will have TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube as well live. Starting with shorts and eventually our own longer form content as well. But that'll be launching in the coming weeks, and I imagine it will be similarly named around Promoted Resume on those platforms.
All right, promotedresume.com.